Here is today's financial tip from Lasco Financial Services.
Keep true to your plans. For example, write a grocery list before you go shopping and stick to it.
So what up? So mistake. I was so frightened. All right, we move on. Now, tomorrow, I'm told, is World Haemophilia Day. Didn't know that. And we're going to look at the facts with Alex Parkinson of the Haemophilia Society of Jamaica, who's beside me and who suffers from haemophilia, Dr. Dwight Lowe of the University Hospital in the West Indies over that side, and Kerry Ann Lee in front, whose child has haemophilia. Not the first Kerry Ann Lee I think I'm meeting. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Thank you.
Dr. Lowe, let me start with you. What is haemophilia?
Okay. Hemophilia is an inherited bleeding disorder. So it means that this is something that you're born with and you acquire through family. Basically, it's due to a lack of an essential clotting factor. There are two types of hemophilia. Blood clotting factor.
Okay.
So it may be clotting factor 8 or clotting factor 9. So there is hemophilia A, where there's a deficiency, either an absence or a reduced level of clotting factor 8. And there's hemophilia B, where there's a reduced level of clotting factor 9. How the blood system is set up is that the clotting process involves clotting factors, and you need these clotting factors to work in collaboration with each other. So it's sort of similar to a relay, like a 4x100 meter relay, where you need each member of the team to pass the baton around to finish. When you have a deficiency or absence of one of those clotting factors, you may have initiation or starting of the process, but when you get to the portion where clotting factor 8 or clotting factor 9 is needed, there is impairment to finish the process. And so what happens is that there is an attempt and there's an initiation of the clot, but it doesn't mature, and therefore the person's at risk of bleeding.
Okay. In preparing for this, it says other types include hemophilia C.
Yes, so there are other clotting factors that are associated with bleeding disorders. So whereas hemophilia specifically, we're talking about hemophilia A and B, the hemophilia disorders, blood bleeding disorders, involve other clotting factors.
Okay.
So there's 11. There's von Willebrand's disease, which is one of the more common inherited disorders that affects both males and females.
Okay.
So it's a group of disorders.
All right. Sir Alex, I said you're living with hemophilia, and not only you and your family, a couple of your brothers.
Yes.
How did you know, and what does it do to the body? How did you find out that you have hemophilia?
Well, the eldest of the three is more severe. So he had to be in and out of hospital a lot with bleeds. So from then we discovered that he had hemophilia. And then we had our next brother and then myself. So that's where we basically knew that hemophilia was in the family, and the bleeding patterns basically exhibited themselves from early. So when we were growing up...
What do you mean by the bleeding patterns?
Okay, for example, when we were teething, changing teeth, we had a lot of bleeds. So at night you would be going to bed, when you're waking up, it's blood clot in your mouth or just straight blood. So it'd be...
And that would come from the parents, Doc?
Yes. So hemophilia is what we call sex-linked. So you know that men have an X and Y chromosome from your biology days. Women have 2 X chromosomes. The gene that makes the clotting factor is present on the X chromosome.
So only men...
So men manifest the disease, they're affected by the disease, but women or females are carriers. So with women,
don't have the
they don't have the disease. So females have 2 X chromosomes. So there is that abnormal X chromosome with the abnormal gene, but they have another normal X chromosome to balance it to prevent manifestation.
Okay.
Men only have 1 X chromosome and a Y, and therefore having that defective gene on the X chromosome in men with X and Y, they will manifest the disease.
Having said that, I'm not even certain, just before I go to Kerry Ann, if this question makes sense. Does that mean both parents need to?
No. So the typical scenario is a female carrier who may not know she's actually a carrier, whose spouse, normal, unaffected male, has children. For each pregnancy, if that pregnancy gives rise to a male infant or a male baby, there is a 50% chance that that child is affected.
Kerry Ann's son has hemophilia. Does it necessarily have to come from Kerry Ann, or could it come from her mom or her father? Or
so Kerry Ann would be a carrier.
Would be a carrier.
Yes, and that would have been passed down through the family.
Kerry Ann, how did you find out that your child has it? How old is he now?
He's now 14.
And how is he doing?
He has good days and sick days.
Which means he's not necessarily doing as wonderfully as you would want.
Exactly.
How did you find out?
All right. When he was born, he went home as a normal baby, and then about a week after taking him home, I noticed bruising marks behind his ears.
Bruising marks?
Yes. So he had purple marks behind his ears, and he had a big swelling on the top of his head.
Wow.
And when I took him to the doctor, the doctor panicked and she was like, take him to the hospital. No. When I got to the hospital, they suspected child abuse because he was just a baby with these marks all over him. And he had, like where the buttons would touch his chest, he had all the impressions on his chest.
Wow.
So something was really wrong. And they did their investigations, and I spoke with my sister, whose son also has it, and she said, no, that's hemophilia, you need to tell them. So I told the doctors, and they checked, and they found out that he actually had hemophilia.
Dr. Lope, Kerry-Ann tells me that her son has crutches now.
Yes.
Well, I thought it was a blood disorder. What would it do that someone would need crutches?
Right, so one of the more common manifestations is bleeding into the joints.
Okay.
Right, so the joints are weight-bearing parts of your body, moving mechanisms as well. So often more than that, their knees, elbows, ankles are often affected.
Okay.
And with repeated bleeds in these joints, which are called hemophilia, which is basically blood in a joint, blood is not typically supposed to be in your joint, so it's toxic to the joint. And over repeated occasions, there's joint damage and deformity, which eventually can become quite severe, which needs crutches, etc., which causes what is called a hemophilia arthropathy, which is joint changes.
Kerry-Ann, what's your son's name?
Michael.
Can Michael be cured of this?
Okay, so the closest thing we are at to a cure is something called gene therapy, which different mechanisms to stimulate the body's production of normal factor VIII gene. However, where the most effective forms of treatment really involves replacement of the clotting factor that you require. So there's commercially prepared recombinant factor VIII concentrates. So this is administered intravenously. That's the ideal scenario.
Okay.
Locally, we tend not to have clotting factor concentrates on all occasions. This is expensive. We're talking about $1.50 US per unit. Each vial is about $490 units. So you can do the math there. So we have to use blood products sometimes, but blood products is safe.
So Alex, what happens tomorrow?
All right, so tomorrow is World Hemophilia Day, and we're basically on a campaign to spread more awareness about hemophilia. The theme for this year's World Hemophilia Day is sharing knowledge makes us stronger. So therefore, there's a lot of outreaching we'll be doing. So we'll be targeting the A&Es, the schools, virtually everywhere.
Okay.
All right, so
I said about Michael's pain. What about you? What does it do to you?
Well, I've been seeing better days now, but in earlier days it was pretty much the same as Michael. Missing schools, pains to the joints.
Why? Just because of the pain?
The swelling, yes, swelling and pains in the joints.
So Michael's out of school now?
Yes, most days he's out of school.
Because of the pain?
Because of the pain.
Gosh.
Yes.
What about treatment? How tough is that for you? Is it easy and to get it, and is it inexpensive? What?
Well, for now, as I mentioned, the hospital gets donations, so we don't have to pay for factor, but we have to pay for the other aspects of treatment, like the hospital stay, blood work, etc.
And is it medicine that he needs to take every day, a couple of times a day? What
well,
happens?
in Jamaica, it is treated on an as-needed basis. So once he's bleeding, I'll take him to the hospital, and they'll give him the factor VIII that he needs, and then he'll be able to go home if it's not a severe bleed. If it's severe, they keep him.
Anything happens at home, you could look after it, or you have to take him to the doctor?
I do give him his factor at home sometimes.
That's what, injected?
Injection, yes.
And you do that yourself?
Yes, I do.
How prevalent is this, Doc?
Right, so it's a rare disorder. It's about 1 in 10,000 persons affected. But if you think about the complications and ramifications to each patient, it is significant. And that's a part of the advocacy and education that we are about, which we heighten on World Hemophilia Day. Because as Karen spoke about, the clotting factor concentrates aren't always readily available, and we do get them on compassionate grounds. But we still want to advocate for our own local regional authority to have a supply. We may not be able to afford it for all patients every time, but definitely for emergency cases. We currently actually have a case of an intracranial bleed, which is a bleed in the brain. And that's a life-threatening bleed. And the amount of factor that you need to cover that is given every 8 hours, and it's based on the weight. So you're talking millions of dollars.
Okay.
So we need to advocate.
I hate to ask this question, but since you said life-threatening, should they be concerned that they...
So the main problems currently with her son, which I know, is really the disability.
Okay.
The chronic arthropathy or the joint changes,
Okay.
which limits his ability to go to school. And education is key, because for such an expensive disorder to treat, we need to ensure that education is maximized to the tertiary level. So it is debilitating in terms of chronic, but yes, it is life-threatening.
I hope it gets better for Michael.
I
hope it gets better for you and your family. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, consultant hematologist at UA Hospital, Dr. Dwight Lowe, co-chair of the Hemophilia Society of Jamaica, Alex Parkinson, and Kerry Ann Lee, who also has a Hemophilia Society of Jamaica. You're a part of the group also? And her son Michael has hemophilia. Stay with us.